So thank you for joining us today, Julian. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. So you are a performing concert pianist, of course, and you also teach at the Royal College of Music and the Royal Birmingham Conservatoire. So
Mhm.
I'd like to begin by asking you, how did you start learning and playing piano?
Oh, golly. Well, I don't remember a time when I didn't. My
Yeah,
mother was a professional pianist, my father too, and we had a piano at home, and I just scrambled up to it already when I was two, and somehow, uh, bashed away for a bit, but then very quickly started making a bit more sense of it than other kids might have done.
yeah.
Didn't really have any lessons till I was about six.
Oh, great. So who did you eventually study with when you went to college, and who were your biggest influences as teachers?
Well, before I went to college, anything like that, I had a local teacher for a year or so, and
Yes.
then I managed to get introduced to, well, my father fixed an introduction to Arthur Benjamin, composer, but what a lot of people don't know is that his sort of day job was piano teacher, piano professor at the Royal College of Music. So
Oh,
he refused to teach me. He said I'd been doing everything all wrong and it was all chaotic and I'd been playing stuff that was much too difficult for me and he didn't have
oh,
the patience to undo all my habits. However, he agreed to take me for theory and composition and pass me on for piano to the wonderful Lamar Krausen, American pianist, who everybody over a certain age will remember as the absolute top guy for chamber music and duo playing, but he was a fantastic solo pianist as well. So this was my great good fortune because he was an incredibly patient and thorough teacher, and I had him from 7 to 11. At which point he got too busy with his own concerts to keep me on, and I got a place at junior college where my teacher was Michael Goff Matthews, who later became director of the college. And then by a bit of a circuitous route, because at a certain point I kind of stopped, I kind of lost interest in classical music and rebelled against it. But
yes.
dashing back, scrambling back, I had a kind of crash course with John Barstow, who then became my much admired and revered teacher at senior college. I learned a lot from him and got introduced to a lot of unusual music, which was new to me. And
Yes.
above all, Scriabin, who I've loved for the rest of my life, or so far. Don't suppose I'll stop now. And after that, I went to Oxford, carried on studying a little bit with him, and then had some private lessons over a couple of years with Louis Kentner and various other influences, various people I've played to since then. It was a long time ago now, but it included Charles Rosen, Alfred Brendel, and at Prussia where I was class pianist for many years, I had some wonderful input from people like Ferenc Rados and George Kurtag.
Oh,
So
that's
there we
great.
go.
Great. So I've just got a message on the video that people can't
Mm.
see you. I think they can hear you, but please let me know in the chat if you can see Julian now, because he should be appearing on the video. But if that's happening, we might have to do a quick restart or something. Um, so sorry about that. So
Is there anything
it's,
I can do?
I don't think so. Maybe
Mm.
I don't know what it could be, but it should be appearing. Let me just bring you on. Okay, now it's okay now. Thank you. That was my mistake. Sorry, everybody. I did something wrong. Okay, but they could hear you there, so sorry about that.
Whether it's better now you can see me or not so good is not for me to say.
Okay. Well, thanks for your patience, everybody. Okay, so you also uh, learned, or you got interested in jazz pretty early on, didn't
Oh,
you?
well, as I said, around about the age of 12, I decided that all classical music was boring and fuddy duddy and old
Yes.
fashioned. I was mad at that point on the hit parade, basically. Then a little bit later, I got into jazz dance music, and in fact, my local town, Worthing, was distinguished by the fact that it had a youth swing orchestra, Worthing Youth Swing Orchestra. So I got into that, and in fact, I kind of learned how to play jazz and read chord symbols from the wonderful Keith Emerson, that
Oh
was in
wow.
Lincoln Park,
Yeah.
etc. Sadly, no longer with us. But then when he left to go professional in London, I stepped into his shoes. I did that for a couple of years. And when I came up to London at the end of 1965, the National Youth Orchestra was just being founded. So I auditioned for that and somehow got the position. So I played in Nijo for a bit while I was a student, and then a little bit after that for a year or two. And it's remained, I mean, I don't really play jazz seriously now. I wouldn't presume to call myself a jazz pianist, but it's remained a very strong influence. I still listen, I
Yes.
still play for myself, and I mean, it's involved the composition that I do and some film scores that I wrote many years ago.
That's great. And did you find it affected your technique in any way, or what you'd learnt before from teachers?
Yes, very badly. In fact, I
Yeah.
came up to college with a completely screwed up classical technique and got hand problems, which only quite slowly got sorted out by Alexander and this, that, and the other.
Oh yeah.
And, I was playing classical with a jazz technique, and the jazz technique itself probably wasn't very sorted either. So, all my life, I've had to watch it, which I think does no harm, and it helps one in one's teaching in a way. So, I just have to watch how I'm playing and what everything
Yes.
feels like.
Yeah.
But Rados was a great help in that.
I think that's interesting because I think we're always maintaining technique anyway, even if we don't have severe habits sometimes.
Mm,
But
mm.
it's very
You can't
easy.
do anything without technique. I mean,
Yes.
technique means the way of doing something. The technique of opening a beer bottle or whatever it might
Yeah.
be. So you can't play the piano without knowing how to do it. That's the only meaning of technique, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes. Okay, great. So I want to talk a bit about the collaborations that you've done during your performing career. You've played with a lot of, let's say, high-profile musicians. So would you like to tell us about them?
Well, I think that, having played in a swing band from the age of about 14, it went very well for me to be playing with other people. And
Yes.
so as soon as I got to college, if there were any opportunities, I tried to take them. I remember being faced with the Brahms E-flat clarinet sonata
Oh yeah.
or viola sonata and turning over to page 2 and thinking, this is impossible. So, I did as much as that as I could. And then in my third year, because they discovered I was quite a good sight reader, I was taken down to the opera school, down, I say, because it was in the basement in those days. And there were a whole lot of wonderful singers who were kind of older and more sophisticated. I remember, for instance, the wonderful Della Jones. And that got me into Mozart, Verdi, Puccini,
Yes.
all sorts of wonderful music like that. So that was another thing. I did more of that when I was at Oxford, for instance, for Jane Glover and Peter Robertson conducting Mozart, which I've always loved Mozart operas all my life. And then when I went professional, the one thing that happened was that I got invited to be the class pianist at Prussia Cove, an
Yes.
international musician seminar, which was then still directed by the musical founder Sándor Vég, great Hungarian violinist and quartet leader who remains one of my prime influences in my life, as all my students know. And so firstly I did the cellists, and then I did the violinists, and then I went into sort of honourable semi-retirement with the violists. It was a smaller repertoire and fewer of them, and they're all very laid back. But one way or the other, I got to know the entire duo repertoire and a lot of the chamber music repertoire. So I found that I was doing concerts with Nigel Kennedy, Stephen Isserlis in the early days, Colin Carr, the wonderful Marius May, who's left us now, Murray Welsh, a lot of cellists always, but violinists as well. And a little bit later on, I had some tours with wonderful performers, legendary performers like Zara Nelsova, the cellist, Ivry Gitlis, who's about to have his 98th birthday, and the most astonishing free and sort of wild but disciplined at the same time player ever.
Yes.
And so then, I mean, I was playing with the London Sinfonietta and some orchestral work with the BBC Orchestras LSO and London Sinfonietta, I think I said. And then we had this mixed chamber group, Capricorn, which toured a lot, actually, Arts Council tours and abroad, so did all the chamber music repertoire. Later on, my piano trio of London, with Elizabeth Perry and Melissa Phelps. And
yes.
I mean, at this point, I'd got rather fiercely into what we used to call avant-garde music. Seems to be a little bit of a disappeared term now. But in the 80s, I was very much into that. And I had a duo, mainly two pianos, with Andrew Bohr, who we were at Oxford together. And we were playing Stockhausen and Ligeti, not Boulez actually, York Höller, all kinds of ferocious stuff. And I almost put my hands back to zero again. Gradually started doing less than that.
Oh, yes.
Now I have my wonderful piano duo with Mariko Brown.
Oh, yes.
More piano duet with some two pianos. And we've been recording and we're about to make another CD.
Great. So, yes, I was going to talk about, I wanted to talk about your collaboration with Mariko. So you've been preparing to record this month, like in a few weeks, is that right?
That's right. I mean, it's in less than a couple of weeks now. Scary.
Yes.
And this is, we did we've done 3 CDs now. The first was actually a recording of my father's music, Morris Jacobson.
Okay.
That had some solo piano,
Yes.
2 duo items, including the major item, theme and variations, some cello pieces with Raphael Walfish, and a couple of songs with Jennifer Johnston. We then did a recording for Somme Records, which was centered around the Fantasia Contrapuntistica of Busoni.
Yes.
Wild, visionary half-hour piece. That's for 2 pianos. And the rest was mainly piano duet stuff, mainly French stuff, actually, including, I think, the first recording of the duet version of Debussy's ballet, the ballet that sort of disappeared, called Come Back Rain, All Is Forgiven. There's sort of Egyptian themes. Just when you want it, you can't find it. Anyway, that was really exciting. And so this is a follow-up CD for that. And this is based around my own 2 transcriptions for piano duet of wonderful Gershwin pieces, An American in Paris and The Second Rhapsody. And it's filled up by Rhapsody in Blue, which was already in existence in a wonderful piano duet version by Henry Levine. And to fill it up, the symphonic dances from Bernstein's West Side Story in the transcription for 2 pianos of John Musto.
That's great. And I particularly love the Second Rhapsody of Gershwin, actually, and I think I'm sure you'll agree it deserves to be heard much more.
Well, indeed. A lot of people don't know it. A lot of people who even love Gershwin barely know that it exists. It's had a bit of a bad press. But Gershwin himself thought it was the best piece he wrote.
Oh, wow.
It's much more developed than Rhapsody in Blue, which is in effect the first Rhapsody.
Yes.
It's 7 years later. And he said, in many respects, such as form, orchestration, harmony, it is the best thing I have done. Somehow or other, it didn't seem to get established, and even the full score is not published. It's certainly going to be published now. But I had to transcribe it from the photostat of the full manuscript, which I managed to get hold of. The Royal College of Music Library managed to get hold of it for me. And I ruined a little bit more of my eyesight by poring over this. I mean, things like flute and piccolo parts were more or less just a smudge, guessing and whatever. But that's what spearheaded this whole thing. I heard it one day on the radio. I thought, what on earth is this? Turned out to be the Second Rhapsody, Michael Tilson Thomas.
Yes.
And when I heard this wonderful tune, excuse me, had to do something for it. So
Yes.
that spearheaded this entire thing, and if you like, this entire CD.
Oh, that's great. I look forward to listening to that when it's ready.
Great.
Great. So now I want to talk about one of the most impressive feats you've accomplished in your career, and that is the Beethoven Sonatas marathon. So for those who don't know, quickly, Julian has done, I don't know how many times, is it 3 or 4 times or more?
3.
3 times, okay.
3.
So Julian has performed all 32 Beethoven sonatas in one day. So would you like to tell us about that, how you got the idea and the experience of doing that?
Sure. Well,
Yes.
I didn't particularly play Beethoven when I was younger.
Yes.
But I was always kind of brooding on it and never really had time, and then thought I really would like to do a cycle. So actually, when I took the job of head of keyboard studies at the Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama in 1992, I had a salary for the first and only time in my life,
Right.
and that bought me summer vacations with not much to do. So
Right.
I suddenly thought, right, I'm going to do this. And at that point, I think I'd only played 10 complete sonatas. And I mean, I'd never played the Moonlight or the Pathétique, because when I was younger, I kind of tended to avoid the popular pieces.
Yes.
So one summer, I just kind of went mad, locked myself away, and for 6 weeks, sort of 6 to 8 hours a day, attempted to learn the remainder of them. And my first cycle was actually supposed to be in Cardiff at the Welsh College. It couldn't happen for some reason or other. But my friend and colleague John Thwaites, who was then head of piano at Christ's Hospital School in Horsham, very kindly stepped in and took that. At the same time, Colin Carr, who's directing the series of concerts at St John's College, Oxford, fixed up for me to do it there. So at one point I was doing sort of 2 cycles at different stages at the same time, which was a bit hairy. And then a little bit later, I did in fact do it at the Welsh College. So it's just, I mean, having done, I should explain that by then I had actually already done 2 or 3 cycles anyway.
Oh, yes.
No, these were cycles. These weren't marathons. I'm talking rubbish as usual. These were my first cycles, so they were over 8 concerts.
Oh, yes.
And
yes.
I did a couple more of those, one at Trinity College, for instance. And then one day, the thought suddenly came to me, I wonder if it's possible to play them all in a day. And once I'd got that idea, it simply wouldn't let me go. I wondered if it would be possible, what it would feel like, who would take it, how long it would take. So I did timings, and I worked out that by omitting the exposition repeats, it was about just under 11 hours playing.
Oh, right.
10 hours
Yes.
45, something like that. And I thought, right, this idea is not going to let me go. If I get to the end of my life and saying to people, I once thought of doing them all in a day, but I just didn't think I could do it, or something like that, then that would be a bit of a pity. So I did it. In fact, people say I did them all from memory. In fact, in 2 of the 3 marathons, I put the music up for the hammerklavier, because that is so cruel.
Oh, yes.
One of them for the whole piece, in one of them only for the fugue, because I actually read that Busoni, no less, possibly the greatest pianist that ever lived, refused to play the fugue of the hammerklavier from memory, put up the score just for that last movement. So I thought, well, if Busoni can do it, so can I. But somehow or other, I feel if I do it again, I'm going to go for the whole lot.
Wow.
From memory, if I can do it.
Great. So while you were doing that during the day, what kind of experiences did you have? Like, did you find sometimes your hands were just playing by themselves, and then you came back and realised what you were doing, or something else?
Well, that's a good way of putting it, Daniel. Yes, I think it was like that sometimes. And just occasionally, I think only in the first marathon, I found I wasn't quite in the piece I was playing, but a little bit in the one before, and then my hands would take over and give me a bit of a jolt. The hands themselves weren't really much of a problem. They just started sort of flowing, you know. Um, I remember the first one, which was in St James Church, Piccadilly. The sun was shining down round about 10:30 in the morning,
Oh yes.
and
Yeah.
it's something I just hadn't bargained for, and I got a terrible headache
Oh no.
and thought this is the craziest thing I've ever signed up to. But you know, the sun went down. I took a couple of paracetamol, and that went away, and we just kept going. I mean, always there's a point where you just think, I can't do this. You know, this is just crazy. I think this is in common with what I've read about most people doing any kind of marathon. And then you get through that, and there's a certain point of exhilaration when you kind of know you're going to make it. And
Yes.
then you just carry on. I mean, thank goodness the last three, for whatever their sort of emotional and interpretative challenges, aren't among the hardest technically.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, and I guess, of course, you didn't do a full run through before the first marathon, really.
Well, I decided not to because I thought either I'll do it well and I'll get too self-confident, or I won't be able to do it and then I'll cancel it.
All right.
So I
Yes.
did sort of part marathons. I think I did 8 sonatas at a time,
Okay.
and but no more than that.
Yes. Well, that's great.
I
And
will say I did all three up to now. I did them in chronological order, except that actually I put the I did tend to put the hammerklavier out of sync so I could get it out of the way. What I think I'm going to do if I do it again is actually make them into programs, because I think it's more interesting for the audience.
yes.
It saves
Yes.
them getting a whole lot of, well, I don't, you know, every single sonata by Beethoven is wonderful and a masterpiece, but it perhaps saves too many youthful pieces at the beginning and then just too much richness and intensity towards the end. So I think, for my sake and the audience's, I'll do them in programs
Oh,
again,
yeah,
not
that'll be
chronologically.
interesting. So, you told me earlier before we started, but where are you going to? Where are you planning to do your next marathon?
Well, it's not fixed yet, but I
Okay.
have had a little bit of conversation with St Paul's Church, Covent Garden, which is absolutely beautiful church, and they were sympathetic. And I've been to a couple of things recently, one of which was a memorial concert for Sir Richard Rodney Bennett, who I knew quite well,
Oh
and
yes.
it's got such a wonderful, wonderful atmosphere for music. It's very central. It also has family connections because my aunt, who was an actress, lived quite near there, and so it just feels like it's got the good vibes. But I mean, I probably shouldn't be saying this because there's absolutely nothing definite yet and no definite date.
Okay. Well, like I said to you, hopefully I'll be in London at the time to come and
Yeah.
listen. Okay, so um, if anyone has got any questions as well for Julian in the chat, just put some below and then I'll look at those shortly and ask him a couple of questions as well. So I wanted to ask you a general question about performance. So you've done all the usual kinds of performances like recitals, concertos, chamber music, and do you have any of those that are your favourite type of performance to do?
I adore playing concertos. I get such a buzz, possibly because, in fact, I've never done that many of them.
Okay.
It just somehow the bigness of the occasion, the repertoire, and I don't know, it seems to me to have all the advantages of both solo playing and chamber music, ensemble
Yes.
playing. I love that. And I mean, again, I haven't done that much of it. Might try to do more. Directing from the keyboard, Mozart concertos
Oh
is
yes.
just such a joy.
Yes.
Um, Otherwise, I couldn't really say because they do different things. I mean, in a recital, you're absolutely in your own space, and that has a very special momentum and energy about it. But chamber music or duo playing has another ensemble energy with the human contact and the interaction, and you know, trying to keep the thing on track. You can never, by definition, always go the same way that you've rehearsed. So
Yes.
that's also another great stimulus.
That's nice. And are there any of the like the big concertos, as we call them, that you haven't performed yet and you'd like to in the future?
I think I've done most of the ones that I really love to
Yes.
play at least once. um, I mean, I don't think I'm in the market for Rack 3, Rachmaninoff third
Oh yes.
anymore, or Prokofiev second. So I've done both the Ravels, for instance.
Yes.
Funny enough, I've never done Beethoven first.
Okay.
So you never know. It would be wonderful to do that. I've done all the
Yes.
others. I was going to be doing the triple concerto later this year. Sadly, that's had to be shelved for the time being. So that would be very nice. I've done both the Brahms, Rachmaninoff second, and the Paganini Rhapsody. I've never done the Grieg. I actually recorded the first movement once for a kind of educational thing.
Okay.
So
Yes.
there we go. But I'm always in the market for a concerto performance if anybody out there wants to invite me.
Yes, I guess you want to complete the Beethoven concertos, really.
That would be nice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and are there any composers that you enjoy playing above all the others?
Yeah. I mean, obviously Beethoven, the thing is they give you back very different things, don't they? I mean,
Yes. Yeah.
no great composer is kind of duplicated by any other great composer. So one is in a different head and heart space for each composer. I will say that I've, while acknowledging that Bach is possibly the greatest genius that ever lived in music or indeed anything else,
Yes.
I've never actually felt that close to him as an interpreter myself. Maybe that'll still come. But Mozart, I absolutely love playing. Beethoven, obviously. Schubert, yes, sometimes and sometimes not so much. Somebody's going to hang me for that. Schumann, Chopin, Liszt. I mean, I didn't expect myself to be playing the Liszt Sonata again, but funnily enough, I got an invitation to play it for the reopening of St. John Smith Square
Yes.
just a few weeks ago.
Oh,
So
great.
I mugged it up, having not played it for nearly 30 years, and
Yeah.
played it, and that's coming out on the 25th of March. Well, I shall have a stiff drink before that. And Debussy, well, I absolutely adore French music, so very close to Debussy. I love playing any Debussy. Ravel also, Gershwin, Scriabin's got a very special place for me. So I think that's covered the kind of main figures in my pantheon.
Oh, great. So when you started performing, there was a time when you just performed, wasn't there, before you started your teaching at the conservatoires?
Well, there was 10 years. I mean, I did teach just out of Oxford. I taught for 10 years at Royal Holloway College,
Okay.
University of
Yes.
and junior college. But then I did stop for 10 years. I was getting too much playing then and getting into a tangle organizing it all.
Yes.
So for 10 years of my 30s, I just cut loose and all my energies went to performing. Then out of the blue, well, the diary was a bit thin one year. Out of the blue, I put in for and got the job of head of keyboard studies at the Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama in Cardiff.
Yes.
So that catapulted me back into teaching in big time, a big scale anyway.
And how did you find teaching influenced your own playing?
I mean, I'm sure hugely. Every time you think about how you teach something to whatever level of student, you're thinking about it technically, physically, musically, analytically. I think I learned to read scores much more carefully and analytically. And so it's a two-way process, and so one is constantly learning, I think, by teaching.
Oh, that's great. So I've got a question here from Alicia Fidakovic. I hope I said your name right. She taught me that a few weeks ago, actually. And she asks, do you have any favourites, Chopin or Schumann?
Absolutely. Let's take Chopin first. Oh, I mean, I love Chopin. I always have done, and grew up with him as a child. Very early on, I was totally bewitched by the A minor Mazurka, Opus 17, number 4.
Yes.
That one. Then the preludes, I would say, are absolutely at the top in my book. Maybe these days I'm slightly less in love with the more formal pieces, ballades, scherzi, and whatnot. But of course, they are great. I mean, the fourth scherzo, for instance, some of the nocturnes. It's very difficult to think of much that I don't love in Chopin. Schumann, I mean, I love the symphonic etude, Etudes symphonique. Haven't played them for a while. I find those just absolutely thrilling. So that would, and also the Fantasiestücke, Opus 12, a lot of the chamber music, the D minor piano trio, for instance, the piano quartet, not so much the piano quintet.
Okay, great. So, when...
And the fantasy, I forgot the C major.
Oh yeah, the fantasy, yes.
Yeah, which I've recorded.
Great, so, also you, going back a bit, you gave the premiere of Legetti's Etudes book number 1. So
yeah.
How did you find that?
Practically killed me.
Yes.
I mean, in those days, they only existed in the facsimile of his manuscript.
Yes.
And I got this idea to put them to the Queen Elizabeth Hall, actually. They hadn't been played in London, and I had to move quickly in order to get it. And then I had to learn them. And they are incredibly hard. I mean, number one is, especially in the old manuscript, it's almost... I remember, I don't know who remembers the wonderful modern music pianist Ivar Mikashov, who was very big in England in the 80s and 90s at the old Almeida Festival. I remember him saying to me, "Julian, it's too hard. I'm not going to play it." He played some of the others. So I did my best, and then finally I had 5 weeks where, a little bit like when I finished with the Beethoven Sonatas, I just kind of locked myself away and did the best I could. I think that first performance was sort of comme ci, comme ça. I did then live with them for another couple of years, recorded them for the BBC, and Mr. Legetti actually sent me a very nice letter of appreciation when I sent him the tape of that broadcast. So I was glad I stuck with them and played them at Dartington, Huddersfield, Brighton festivals, and I've since then played one or two of them occasionally.
Oh, great. So I wanted to ask you a question about your own critical thoughts about your own performances. So you're still playing a lot of pieces that you've played for a long time now. So do you find it's easier to perform them now, or do you get more like hypercritical as you go on?
I mean, could I say both?
Yes.
I mean, I feel on more sure ground criticizing myself and trying to get them better. And also, I mean, I've learned to ask questions. So if I have any queries, I go to the experts, you know, rather like we wish Donald Trump would.
All right.
So, for instance, I go to Roy Howard for queries about French music, to Jonathan Delmar, who edited the new Bärenreiter edition of the Beethoven. I did a little bit of help with him about that. For Beethoven, I'm playing a couple of Scarlatti sonatas, which I haven't played for years and years and years. And I got the book out and realized I didn't really know what I was doing with the ornaments. So it's turned out that I've been in conversation, email, chat, I'm sure he won't mind me saying, with Barry Ife, who's a great expert on Scarlatti. So, you know, I think I've learned to realize what I don't know and to try and fix it. And then on the whole, it kind of gets easier. If I know the piece very well, then my hands usually go to the right notes, or most of them, fairly quickly. Even new pieces is kind of easier than it used to be, because I'm still learning new repertoire.
Okay, and so I know that you are performing the Scarlatti sonatas as part of a concert that you're doing next month that will be live streamed. as
Yeah.
part of a piano fest. So would you like to tell us about that, when it is, and how people can join that?
Oh, well, I haven't remembered all the dates now, but I am
Okay.
doing 3 sonata recitals. I think the first of which is in this piano fest on September the 20th.
Okay.
But I decided to do mine as 3 sonata programs because, I don't know, you get to a certain age where you feel like sonatas, the architecture and things. I have a little bit of experience for managing that. And so they're based around 3 Beethoven sonatas. Um, and then, what is it? I can't even remember now. And then 3 pre-Beethoven and 3 post-Beethoven. So the pre-Beethoven are 2 Scarlattis. Well, actually, this makes 4. 1 Clementi and
Yes.
one Haydn. Is it? I can't remember my own programs. I've only recently fixed. And the 3 post ones are Alban Berg Opus 1, Scriabin number 9, The Black Mass, which was a student party piece of mine, getting that up again, and Kapustin number 6. I played very little Kapustin,
Okay.
but I was teaching Kapustin number 6 to one of my best students a couple of years ago, and I said to her, I'm going to play this sometime, so, now's the time. But I have got to learn that from scratch, so, it's
Oh,
going to
wow.
be a bit of a challenge.
Great. So I noticed a few weeks ago on Twitter that you have done some live stream playing as well on Twitter or Periscope Live. So when did you get the idea to do that, and how did you find that?
Well, look, when we went into lockdown, this catastrophic thing,
Yes.
I just thought immediately, I want to play. And I think I almost immediately set up this live stream on Periscope.
Yes.
It wasn't the best sound and it wasn't the best picture, but I did to keep me from losing heart. And, for anybody that wanted to tune in, I did a small piano piece, sometimes 2, maximum 10 minutes, every day for just under 6 weeks. And then I kind of ran out of steam a little bit for it, and we began to start thinking of other things, and very limited startup of Audrey performing as well.
Great.
So, but I'm glad I did that.
And talking of the lockdown as well, have you spent most of your time working on past repertoire or learning some new music as well?
Well, both. For these performances that are coming up, and other things. I haven't learned on anything that I haven't worked on anything that I'm not going to use. I lost a lot of tours and performances. One thing is because I wanted to get this in, and now's my chance. I was going to be in Malaysia in June, playing my own transcription for 2 pianos of A Night on Bear Mountain, Mussorgsky.
Oh, wow.
This is a wild kind of virtuoso transcription, which I wrote for Andrew Ball and me back in 1990. And I did dust that out, and I want to now revise it and publish it, and we were going to play it. So I did a little bit of work on that, and of course, very much hoping that I'll be going there and doing that again. That's with Li Jie Fang, wonderful Malaysian pianist who came on a Beethoven course I was doing in Austria, and we kept in touch, and he's done a couple of wonderful performances for the Beethoven Piano Society of Europe.
That's great. So I've got probably 2 or 3 more questions for you. So you performed in many countries, over 40 countries, I believe, and when you arrive in the places, depending on the time you have and the travel you've just done, on the day of the concert, what do you actually do to be ready? Do you play through everything, or just parts, or something else?
Well, hopefully one is not too jet lagged or anything like that, and nothing too drastic has gone wrong with the travel or the hotel or anything.
Yes.
But all things being equal, no, I don't play through everything. Sometimes I do. It depends, and it depends if it's solo or duo or whatever.
Yes.
But I prefer not to play everything through, but top and tail them. Actually, I've got a strange superstition, which is that I never play the final chord of any piece on the day. I leave that to me.
Yeah.
I leave that to the concert. So there's always something that I haven't played. And well, I always prefer if that rehearsal can be in the morning. It can't always be, and then to
Yes.
go back and sleep in the afternoon.
Okay, and which countries and venues are some of your favourite places to play?
Well, I don't know that I've ever been to anywhere repeatedly enough to say that. I love playing and working in Hong Kong.
Oh yeah,
Um, New York, for instance, I was in Alice Tully Hall once.
yes.
That's fantastic. So, but basically anywhere where they'll have me, I'm happy to make friends with.
Well, that's great. Well, I think that's all I have to ask for you today. So, is there anything else that you have coming up online or any more releases you'd like to mention before we wrap up?
I think only we didn't talk much about the Beethoven Piano Society of Europe. And
Okay.
just to say that I've been chairman of that since the end of 2014. And this year, of course, the Beethoven big year. So we got
Yes.
together a wonderful series of all 32 sonatas played by 32 pianists. Unfortunately, since April, they've all had to go online, but they're going on. One in fact, happened today, very fine performance, and they carry on through to December. The final one, December the 16th, which is his actual birthday in St. James, Piccadilly. I'm finishing with the last sonata, opus 110, 111.
Oh yeah.
And before that, Uruguayan pianist and friend of mine, Enrique Graf, will be playing the Pathetique Sonata, whether live or online remains to be seen. So we hope very much that those can be live.
Okay. Great. Well, there's a few people here in the chat. We got Jing Q, who
Go for it.
says Beethoven first. Come on. So you've got support for that.
Mhm.
And then we've got, I'll just give a shout out to a few people. We've got Morgan Hayes,
Oh, yeah.
Boya Yang, Anne Ewing, and Alicia, again, who asked a question earlier. Okay, so thank you very much for your time today, Julian.
Thank you.
Right,
It's
and
been a pleasure.
thank you, yes. And thanks everybody who has been here watching live and everybody on the replay. See you next time. Thank you very much.